Hey guys, let's have a countdown. Hey guys, what's up? Today, the presentation is not yet loading, so I beg your indulgence. But our topic today is one of the most exciting topics that were presented to us by Stephen Covey Foundation. Stephen Covey, if you know him, he is the author of the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and then he came up with an eighth habit. But of course, after that, he succumbed to illness and he died just recently, not very recently, but quite recently. And so we talk about the four disciplines of execution as presented by his people in the Stephen Covey Foundation. Okay, so sorry until now it's not yet loading, but it's processing. It's about to come out, I guess. It's a huge presentation. I don't know if I can finish everything in our time today, but as I said, the four disciplines of execution focuses instead of the planning, uh, we focus on the discipline of executing the plan because according to many pundits, so-called pundits in quality management and in strategic planning, the problem lies not with the planning but in the execution of the plan. And here we have the four Ds, or so-called four Ds, or the execution discipline, which really focus on how we manage expectation and how we see to it that the execution is done. Okay, so without further ado, first of all, we talk about closing the execution gap. It's one thing to come up with great strategies and goals, but it's quite another to actually get them done. Yeah. So as I said, this is what we call the execution gap. There's a gap in the execution, and this is really what makes a lot of managers, a lot of leaders go into the trenches, so to speak, when they are planning because we have a lot of problems in the execution. And usually we don't, we cannot really blame the soldiers or what we call the people because they are only there, their strength is only limited by the instructions, their training, and how they are being managed by their leaders, right? Yeah, so we have here execution gap. We have results that are not controllable. We also have results that are controllable, and so that's why we have a plan for it, but then we have to execute the plan, and that is why we need to execute it. The thing is, if you are unable to execute the plan, what happens is that you are the ones being executed. This is why we have here a hangman finish, right? So because as they say in the industry, heads are gonna roll when you hear that. That means either you get sacked, or your boss gets sacked, and that's it. That's a problem because if the results are controllable and you don't have a plan for it, or sometimes you have a plan but you don't execute it, then it says a lot to the leader doing the execution. That is why we are really more into the area now. We are really now more into the the age of execution rather than planning. Yeah. So yeah, the execution one says that when you do the plan or the goals, 50% would hear the goal. 50% hear the goals and they know what to do with that. But 50% of those who know what to do with the goals keeps the score. And 50% of those who keeps the score are even accountable. So what does that mean? When you look at this is already a breakdown of execution. So if you have 100 people hearing the goals, 50%, only 50% would hear the goal, and 25 will know what to do, 12 will keep the score, while only 6 will be accountable. So if that's the case, only 6% will ever make it to the end. So as we look at this scenario, if you look at this, you have 100 people hearing the goals, or 100 people to start. Only 6% will be held accountable. And that is why if only 50% will be held accountable and only 50% of those who are accountable are able to do the job done, and make the job done, that means we only have 3% success rate. And this is the scenario in majority of the companies that we have here. Yeah. So first of all, I think one of the things that were made clear in the book of uh, of Stephen Covey, is the what we call the whirlwind as a breakdown in execution. And this happens a lot. The real execution challenge is executing in the midst of a whirlwind. And in your work, in your job, it is seldom that you are able to do your job without whirlwind, without people knocking on your doors, uh, you know, asking for a meeting when it wasn't. There's no set of meeting in the day, and then you know that you're going to do something, and then something comes up, and you are now being called by whoever, the president or whoever, right? So because of that, there's so much whirlwind going around, and that's the reason why there's an enormous energy required just to maintain the business. So this is really one of the reasons why businesses seldom break down. They have a breakdown in execution. So another example, a remarkable example of execution gap is that, okay, so we have here an example of I think this is a hotel, and one of the goals of the hotel is 97% guest retention. So what they say is, if you stay here once, we want you back. So that's a kind of individualized personal service, right? So the goal of customer retention is top priority. Few new activities were vital to achieving the goal. We hope that they would track those activities carefully, and then we would account for their commitment regularly and frequently. You know, we want we want to be sure that our people, they know the goal, 97% guest retention. They know what to do to achieve the goal. They know the score. Sorry about the wrong spelling. They know the score. They know the scorecard. They know their KPIs, and they know how they're doing, and then they hold themselves accountable for the results. And those are the characteristics of execution. And if you have this kind of a culture of or environment in your team, then execution will not be a problem. It will always be harder not to execute if you have a team like this. So this is why the four disciplines of execution by Covey highlights on how what do you need to do in order for the any company or any group, any organization, in order for any company to have a goal and execute the goal, to finish up with what they start. Okay, so discipline is a consistent regimen that leads to freedom of action. Discipline one, and this is now the start of the four disciplines. The first discipline is focusing on the wildly important. Discipline two is acting on the lead. Discipline three is keeping a compelling scoreboard. And discipline four is creating what we call a cadence or cadence. No? We call that when we were still doing the military thing, back in high school when we have the ROTC, the YDT, and then ROTC. There's something we call the cadence, left, right, left, right. That's the cadence or account of accountability. If everybody marches on the same tune, then everyone accounts frequently and regularly towards the goal. Okay, so we also note here that the arrows point from right to left, because great teams execute from right to left. They hold themselves accountable on the lead measures, which in turn produces results, acting on the wig, on the team's wig. The wig is the wildly important goals. We'll talk about that a little later, but the goal need not be many. And according to Covey in the presentation that he did, he doesn't want a company to have like 7, 8 10 goals. The wildly important is focusing only on the wildly important. That's why it's called the wildly important goal. I remember one time when we had this um, seminar, with the Philippine Quality Award. One of the companies there also practices four disciplines of execution by Stephen Covey, and he recounted. This is from Johnson and Johnson. He said, we focus on the wildly important. And I asked one of the questions that were asked to him. I think one of those people was the question is me because I came from the academy. I said, it's hard to have just one goal. You're saying there's only one wild important goal. We said that in our company we have a lot of products. I mean, we have thousands of them. But then one year we focused only on the shampoo, for example. So you're just saying, this year we're going to sell 100 million units of shampoo in the Philippines, for example. So that is the wildly important. It doesn't mean that you don't have other goals, but you have to focus on the wildly important. And that made things clear to me because I'm one of the persons who have a lot of goals hanging on, like if you look at my laptops, a lot of tabs are open. Like currently now I'm looking at my laptop, I'm looking at the browser, and there are like, I don't know, 30 tabs opened right now. But then if you look at the tabs, they're there just because you don't want them to be lost forever. You don't want to look for them because you always, for example, you're looking at your followers in Twitter, or your messages in LinkedIn, or what is happening, what are the new releases in PDF drive, something like that, or YouTube. So these are open, but then you're not focused on them, right? You maybe will get to see them maybe sometime in the evening or early afternoon, the late afternoon, but you don't focus on them. The only way to be executing is to focus only on the wildly important. And usually they said the wildly important goals is less than three. It cannot be, maybe four. Sometimes people would just assign one wildly important goal per perspective of the balance scorecards. And since the balance scorecards have four perspectives, then they have four goals. But these are major goals. And you can't say, oh, but we forgot about this. I remember during the time when I was in former school, I would say, oh, we forgot about the training of the faculty. What about the customer satisfaction measure for our students? What about their board exams? Those are important. But the wildly important goal, if you don't accept that in its totality, then you would be lost, because the reason why a lot of companies fail is because they don't focus on the wildly important. The wildly important are your critical success factors. These are your critical to quality. If you lose them, you lose everything. Like, look at Apple. They only have one core value. The core value is innovation. And when they release a new product like iPhone 12, iPhone 13, that's wildly important. You have to sell this, right? So all the resources, all the energy, all the meetings, all everything focuses or focus on the wildly important. So yeah, that's what we call. That's what we say. That's what we are saying. Focus on the wildly important. And here we quoted uh, Jim Collins. One of the books of Jim Collins is Good to Great, and I think one of the opening lines is, "The enemy of the great is the good." What does he mean by that? When a person refer to himself as a good person, I mean, I'm good at this, I'm good at photography, I'm good at speaking, I'm good at language, I'm good at mathematics. The enemy of becoming great is if you say to yourself that you're good. I'm good already, so why do I need to do that? Because you're not yet great. The if you focus on being good, then you don't become great. So that's the idea of focusing on the wildly important. It has to be wildly important. It has to be wildly good, or in the case of this, it has to be wildly great. And you don't stop until you're number one. So the discipline one is the roadmap. The old thinking is we can effectively accomplish six, eight, or even 10 important goals. So this is what we call, I used to call them the meaningless many. Now, no, they're not meaningless. They're actually important many. So in a way, we're talking about, if you're familiar with the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule means, says that you only have, if you have like 24 hours a day, you make use only of 20% effectively, like 24 hours times 20%, that's about 4.8 hours. What you do in those 4.8 hours define the 80%, that 80% output. So that is why you focus only on the critical to success, the critical to quality, the critical to success factors. And that's the new thinking. We can accomplish only one, two, or three important goals with excellence. And we have to focus on those things. We're not saying that we are leaving the others, because they're important. Like, for example, if you talk about the faculty in among schools, if it's faculty, you know that they're important. You know that their training is important. They know that research is important. Customer satisfaction is important. Social responsibility is important. Everything is important. And you have, like, if you look at the accreditation uh, template, the checklist, you have, I don't know, maybe 300 points there to consider. And if you look at all that and you put all those in the balance scorecard or the KPI, then you will have easily 300 to 350 KPIs. But if you want to be a great school, you only focus on, or a great company, you just focus on the wildly important. What is it that, if you talk about your company, whatever it is, or if you talk about your school or yourself, what is it that is wildly important for you? So it maybe it's a strength, maybe it's something that calls into, the highest opportunity. For example, if there is opportunity of serving in the ASEAN region, then maybe the ASEAN competency is your wildly important goal, right? So it really depends on a lot of factors, but we have to consider what is wildly important, focus on the top priorities, define your wigs, your wildly important goal, and define, look at this, number two, define the lag measures for your wig. So let's focus on the lag and the lead measure. And maybe we will talk about this here, but yeah, okay, lag measures and lead measures. Lag measures, when we say lag measures, they refer to measures that are already achievement of the goal. It means that you already achieved the goal. So lag measures are things of the past. You've already made it, and that's why, it's done. Okay, so those are deliverables, but they are already done. So a famous example to achieving the goal before the end of the decade of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. You see, this statement was uttered by JFK, John F. Kennedy, at the beginning of the 1960s. He said, by the end of this decade, we are going to land a man on the moon and return him safely back to Earth. So you see, from X, which is Earth, to Y, which is the moon, and back, by when? By this decade, or at the end of this decade. So that's an example of a goal, right? And of course, the lag measure will be the actual landing on the moon. If you have not done that, then everything is just a wish, like a dream, right? So those are measures that has to be done, and those are lag measures. Okay, another thing that has to be considered here is that When you define your wildly important goals, you have to create meaningful team weeks. Team weeks means the organization has to have a clear line of sight between your organizational wigs, your team wigs, wherever you are, and then the next level up and other team wigs. So what does that mean? So for example, if there is a wig, and usually it goes from top to bottom and then bottom to top. So that's why the template of the Hoshin Kanri, the Japanese Hoshin Kanri, as a strategic plan, is really appropriate here. So we have a goal on top, like for example, oh, okay. So maybe land in as one of the top 10 universities in the country. For example, that's a goal of the management. So if that's the goal of the management, how do what are the things that you need to do in order to be able to do that? First of all, of course, you need to perform better. You have to perform good, in the board exams. So that could be a wig, right? And what about the presence of uh, good faculty members? That's another one. What about what else? The output of research. That's another one because those are the things that you have to consider, and you have to be rated best, in your league in order for you to be considered as a top university. So you have good board performance. Okay, we have an electrical engineering exam, and then there are 200 takers, only 199 passed, one failed. So that's 99 something percent passing. You're good at that, and you're number one performer there, and you have top 10. What about the faculty? The lineup of faculties, you have 150 faculty members and 149 are PhD holders. Those are clear line of sight. You want to be one of the top 10 universities in the Philippines and even in Asia, then you have to consider all those things that makes you become part of that argument. Even and even in other areas or other uh, industry, like if we don't want to be so formal, for example, in uh, the greatest of all time conversation, okay, like basketball, right? In order to be part of the basketball greatest of all time conversation, or if you don't want the greatest of all time conversation, just focus on the MVP. Then you should have either, are you the champion score in scoring? Do you have a good rebound ratio if you are a small forward or power forward or center? What about assist ratio? What about turnover? Do you don't have a lot of turnovers? What is your rank in the estimated win average? Okay, so these are factors. What about your team? Did you bring your team to the playoffs even? So how can you consider a person, a player whose team did not even make it to the playoffs to be part of the MVP conversation? So that's the clear line of sight. It has to be one to one correspondence. Okay, so we have the organization saying, okay, we want to be considered to be best in class. Best in class means you're like, if you're a research organization, then you would be performing good there, and then the next line is the performance of your uh, board, right? And afterwards is maybe employability ratio of your students, right? So it has to be one to one. Okay, what else? Okay, this is an example of an organizational wig from my former school, and the next level wig, which is the enrollment of the college. So the organization and then the college. Okay, each level has a unique wig, which with a measure. All right, and it has to be clear in the measure. So by 2009, the enrollment should be the increase of enrollment should be 2,000, 2,000 students, and in the College of Computer Studies, the increase of enrollment should be 200 from 295 to 350. So there is a computation in order for them to be in that conversation. Like for example, how many percent of the total is the computer studies? So those are the things that you have to consider. Okay, so you have to define that in order for you to be able to get into the conversation of the weeks. Okay, another example of wigs. Well, we have four examples here. Wigs can arise from any of the four areas of need categorized below. So it can be an organizational directive. Your president says so. Okay, we have to increase our enrollment to 6,000. Okay, that's an organizational directive. Desperate need. Okay, for many years we have been producing only less than 50% performance in board passing performance. And we have to go past the national average. If not, you know, our programs may be closed. So that's a desperate need. Gap closure. What is a gap closure? Mm, uh, our our customer complaints are rising, and the customer complaints, when we did the Pareto analysis, we saw that it always uh, focus on problems concerning the canteen or the prices of the uniform, whatever it is. So those are are gaps, and in order to make a closure on the gap, you have to have a goal, and maybe the wildly important goal there would be about cost, realizing the correct management of cost, because it has become a problem when it comes to customer feedback. So maybe those are considered. And then also, the understanding, and then the fulfillment of the vision, mission, the goals and objectives. So that's important because it's one of your objectives. For example, in my current school, the objectives would be to be considered the school of choice within the Toyota um, industry. So if that's the case, then that means the dealerships of Toyota here and abroad should favor your school, and therefore your outputs, the students, should be on top of, you test the performance and the examinations being given by the Toyota dealers. Okay, so in this case, the important screen, it has something to do with what kind of wigs will you be considering as part of your departmental wigs. We call them the departmental wigs. We have, for example, and these are the areas, all right? Instruction may be considered, financial operational performance may be considered, customer loyalty, or winning culture, distinctive contribution. And then you have to list down the objectives there, right? These are called the candidate wigs, and usually this is the kind of wigs that your team, your departments are writing down. And it has to align to each of the uh, organizational weeks. So maybe in this case, the organizational weeks will have something to do with instruction, will have something to do with customer loyalty, will have something to do with the winning culture, and so on. All right. So this is putting more importance to the things that are more important. So, for example, customer loyalty is the thing. That's the most important or wildly important goal up above, is a wildly important goal for the organizations. Then you have to consider your own important goals in your department. So if I am the HR and customer loyalty is considered here, then how do I increase customer loyalty with the function of HR? And maybe we can say that the students are loyal when they don't leave, and the teachers are also loyal when they don't leave. So we have to increase the retention of the faculty, because if the faculty remains to be in school, then people will see that, the students will see that how our faculty members are loyal to the schools, and therefore they also will send their kids to the school. So those are the consideration, all right? And then they score that, okay? And then okay, so that's one. No? So another thing, okay, I hope you understood this. So anyway, you don't really have to do this, but in organization they don't even score this. I've seen an organization. Of course, if you are, I think the one who did this was from the College of Computer Studies, and that's why they really want to have a scoring mechanism. But if not, you don't have to score it. Just have to choose and have a consensus about what is the most important. And it has to be measurable. If it's not measurable, then what's the point? So lag measure builder proves that. Okay, so lag measure builder is you have a current result, the increase of enrollment in this case, the desired result, okay, which is increasing of enrollment is about 472 for the School of Engineering. Now, their desired result is to increase it to 750, and the deadline is June 2012. So there are questions here. Is it acceptable? Can we meet the date? Can we get the data? Uh, Difficult to manipulate. Uh, the consequence. No uh, uh, unintended consequence. Yeah. So you have to choose among the things that are here. So in this case, I think one of the I think the most important here that was chosen are two. The HM, which is I think the International Hospitality Management, and uh, Computer Studies, which is ranked 1.5. So because there's a tie break, so that's a lag measure builder. Okay. And then the wig and lag flow chart would be like this. Okay, we have a wig and lag measures, increase enrollment from this to that, and then the lag measures would be every school would have its own wig flow chart. So in the case, for example, no, if the if the if the wildly important goal talks about absenteeism, and then of course the absenteeism is limit the absenteeism every day from an average of let's say 100 absenteeism every day, you will limit it to 20. Well, of course, the company here that I'm talking about is a production company and a manufacturing. So in the manufacturing sector, sometimes there are 6,000 employees. So 100 people that are absent, it's not a lot, but it's a lot when you think about the consequence of having a lot of absentees. Because if you have an absences in your line, then either you will underperform, or you will get people from other lines, and they are the ones that are underperforming, or the underperformance talk about lesser quality. So that's really a problem. So in order to combat that, in order to have the closure of the gap of execution, then they said, okay, so we will only have 50 um, allowable absences. And so what happens is that every department would plug in their required only, like okay, accounting only one absent every day, one absent every day. Now for production line, of course, those are the absences that are harder to excuse or harder to remove, right? So what will happen to those people? So maybe they will say, okay, every line should be at least 90% complete. So if there are 10 people in the line, then there should be always 9 out of 10 people every line. So those are the things that you have to consider here. Okay, so yeah, basically that's what we have for today. We don't want to finish everything because we will run very quickly, but we will not be able to understand. I hope that you've learned something about the formulation of the wildly important goals, and why do we need to do that, and what are the things that you have to consider in order to have a successful formulation of the wildly important goal. That's it for me. Thank you very much. This has been Dr. George Atento. I hope you are well and good, and you're in the good condition. Goodbye.